Welcome back, everybody, to our weekly Sermonette. This week is Parshas Shalach. Shalach is the Torah portion that talks about Moses sending spies to the land of Israel to scout the land to see how to conquer, what is the best way to conquer the land of Israel. Now, initially, the word Shlach Lecha, Moses asks God if he should send spies. The Jewish people said, perhaps we should send spies to see how to conquer the land. And God says, Shlach lecha. If you want, you can send. It's up to you. If you're doing it, it's yours, your idea. And Moses ultimately sends 12 spies, and we know the end of the story. The end of the story is where 10 spies come back with a claim that it's a very difficult and too difficult to conquer the land of Israel. And only 2 of the spies come back with a positive report that, yes, we can conquer it, and this is how we should do it. And it's a fascinating story, which ultimately the Jewish people listened to the 10 rather than to the negative spies, and rather than to Joshua and Kalev. And because they cried that night, and some suggested perhaps going back to Egypt, ultimately that generation couldn't make it into the land of Israel, and they had to stay in the desert for 40 years, and it was only the next generation that went into the land of Israel. Now, there's some fascinating nuances, and lots of ink has been spilled over this topic of the spies. These spies were the hand-chosen from amongst the tribes of Israel. But one of the interesting, fascinating concepts, just to focus on 2 tidbits, which I think relate to our lives as well. One of them is that why didn't God tell him to send spies? And why God said it's up to you if you want to send spies? And the second question that we have is, we find if you look in the verses where once the spies they give a very factual report. They came back and they said that, the great comforts they were told to bring back from the fruits of the land, scout the land and bring back from its fruits, and which they did, and they brought back fascinating fruits. Till today, the symbolism of the ministry of tourism is 2 people carrying a cluster of grapes, showing it's a symbolism of the great fruits of the land of Israel that the spies brought back. They were huge. But it's interesting when they gave a factual report of what they saw of the land. The fruits were fascinating. It's a great land, the land of milk and honey. And there are fortified cities. That was factual. And right after that, even before they said that it's going to be too difficult to conquer the land, Kalev jumps up and he silences them, and he starts yelling and telling the people, yes, we could conquer it. They haven't said yet that we cannot conquer it. They were just giving a factual report of the land. Why did Kalev jump up at that point? And then it started the whole conversation. He said they could, they said they can't conquer it, and so on. How did they know that something was amiss at that point, that they were going to give a negative report? And the answer to these 2 questions is, you see, first of all, there's the general concept, which is what was the error of the spies? The error of the spies was they were supposed to go check how to conquer the land of Israel, not if it could be conquered. Obviously, then it was the land of Canaan, future to be the land of Israel. If God said they can do it, they can do it. This is the God that took them out of Egypt, God that split the sea, 10 plagues, gave them manna in the desert, and so on and so forth. Take care of the inhabitants of the land of Canaan is no big deal. They were supposed to check what's the best way to do it, not if it could be done. And that was the error. They decided to come to a conclusion, and there's a lot of reasons why they wanted to remain in the desert, in a spiritual bubble, rather than deal with the realities of day-to-day life. It was an error that they made. But how did Kalev already know that there was a problem? And the answer is, it's interesting if we see the order of the wording. They were told to go see, the city, whether, how one is supposed to be able to conquer it, whether they're fortified cities, not fortified cities, and so on and so forth. What are the people that live in those cities? How do we conquer this? And then to bring back from the fruits of the land to show that, you know what? There's also side materialistic benefits to conquering the land of Canaan. This is going to be a great land, not just spiritually, but also materialistically. This is a great land. And when the spies came back, and their primary focus was first telling them the great materialism of the land, that it has great fruits, land of milk and honey, and then about the difficulties about the fortified cities, they saw right away that their motive was in the wrong place. You see, a lot of times if you have a mission, what is your motive? What is your primary motive? And then I can tell you if it's worth it, the sacrifice that's made for that. If they started just about the benefits, the materialistic benefits of the land, then not necessarily is it worth the sacrifice to be able to make that happen. And when he saw that their interest was only materialistic or primarily materialistic, we knew that's a problem, because then, you know what? At some point, it's not something worth fighting for, or perhaps not worth fighting for. And the idea of conquering the land that God wanted to take them to take them to the Holy Land, the land with all its both physical and spiritual accomplishments. The first thing is there has to be a passion to want to make it happen and know that it could happen. And if that's not there, then that's already a fault in the big picture. So he saw they were going into it for materialistic gain. And that is also in our lives as well. Why are we into Judaism? And the question is, why? Are we doing it because it feels good? Because it has nice camaraderie? We go to shul because it's a nice club? You know, it really makes me feel good. It keeps me focused. All the other psychological things that go along, which are great benefits to being connected to God and Judaism. Is that the reason I'm doing it? Then you know what? At some point, I might not have the fortitude and the strength that it takes. But if the reason I'm going there is because it's God's land and it's my purpose, it's my mission, then you know what? Nothing can stop me. Yes, there's great materialistic benefit, but my primary purpose has to be that it's because of that great mission, purpose, connection, and fulfillment of the purpose that I was created for. Then nothing will stand in its way, and we get to also all the materialistic benefits from it. And in a sense, why the materialistic benefits at all? And the answer is, you know what? That's what God wants. God wants us to be invested. A primary reason is not for material benefit, but he wants us invested. He wants it to be ours. He wants us to partnership with it. He wants us to own it, that it should become part of who and what we are. And for that, we also need some materialistic benefit as well. And that's why, in this case, God didn't want us to go to the land of Israel just because he told us to, but he said to him, Shlach lecha. I want buy-in. I want you guys to want to go. And if you want, let's see how much you want to go. Yes, there's a risk when it's done that way, and there was the risk. And just want to conclude with one final thought about the spies, which is a fascinating thing, which I always saw when you go on later in the book of Deuteronomy and Devarim, when they recount the story of the spies, God, through Moses, rebukes the Jewish people. And he comes and he tells them, he says that the spies told you about the greatness of the land and to go up to the land of Israel, and you refused to listen. Now, if we look at the facts on the ground, not necessarily is that what happened. Actually, the majority said not to go. So why is God rebuking? And the answer is a very fascinating concept, which is, as they say, what's popular is not always right. What's right is not always popular. Not everything goes according to the majority. If God says that this is our mission and this is our purpose and that we're going to be able to do it, even if it's a minority that's giving us that message, then that is the correct message. And we need to keep our ears and eyes perked up and be able to listen to that message and to be held accountable for not following that message. So again, today's days as well, I think there's a great lesson for us. God wants us to buy into this. He wants us to be passionate about it and know that we could do whatever it takes to be in this relationship with God. And God can make everything fall away. And by listening to that message, we should merit, as ultimately we saw the next generation who did have that positive thought process was able to, through Joshua, to be able to go in to conquer the land of Israel. And now 3,000 years later, we're still here to tell the story, despite the odds, despite the popularity, despite the numbers. And let us hope that that journey, which started 3,000 years ago, we should be able to finish that journey. We should have that attitude of Joshua and Caleb, that attitude that we can do it. Alone na'aleh, we'll go up, we'll conquer this land. God can make anything happen. And therefore, let us hope that quickly, even though we have a little downfall right now, in a sense, a little, I should say a valley, but we should know we can go up higher than our situation that we are now. God has brought us this far, it's for a purpose, for a reason, to go even higher than that. Let us hope that we could quickly see how God can make this all melt away very, very quickly, and we should be able to re-enter and reconquer the land of Israel in a sense, in a spiritual sense, and a physical sense, that we should be able to have the land of Israel the way it's supposed to be with the coming of Mashiach. May it be speedily in our days. Amen.